In this short demo, I'm going to show how I organise my jobs and data in Lightroom, and I think this is a fairly efficient method, though there are other methods that I'm also considering doing. I've opened Lightroom up here with all of the photographs in the catalogue selected, but when I shoot a specific job for a client, what I do is I organise them on the hard drive by job ID. So if I go into my folder area in Lightroom, first thing I'll draw attention to is the number of hard drives. I'm just going to hide the navigator window open so we can see that a bit better. And what we can see here is that my folder area, I have three or so hard drives, which let's see, well, in fact 3, 4, 5, which are greyed out. These are offline drives, so these contain data that are currently not connected to the system, but they are drives that I can access at a later date if I plug them in via USB. My main cataloguing drives are these 6 that are here, which are always online because they're installed in the Mac Pro Tower itself. And I've currently got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1 to 1.5 terabyte drives and 1 2 terabyte drive installed in the system. So it's a lot of capacity. Now what I do is I use a technique which I read about some while ago in the Digital Asset Management book, which was designed really for CD-ROMs, where data was backed up onto CD-ROMs in 1 gigabyte or let's say 5 gigabyte units. What I do is all of the subdirectories I keep my images in are stored in 500 gigabyte units. The reason I've done this is because I've got a lot of hard drives which are 500 gigabytes in size, and I can make physical backups onto those drives of any one top level folder into those things, so I can manage secondary storage in 500 gigabyte chunks or buckets. So what I do is once I start operating in a new year, if we look down here it says images 2010-1, I create a bucket. In this case I called it images 2010-1, which is going to be my first 500 gigabyte bucket of images this year. That is broken down into subfolders which hold jobs, personal and worked versions of files. These will all add up to that total of 500 gigabytes in unit, but within each of these I use a folder labeling system that enables me to find things by date. So let's go back to a year. I'm trying to find a year where Oscar, here we are, go down here. 2008, it was a nice year because I did lots of work in my jobs, so it's a good one to sort of show the organisation going on here. Now 2008-1 was the first bucket I started in 2008, and I think I ended up with several of those that are scattered across different drives. It doesn't really matter that those drives don't hold each one in date order, because the searching capabilities of Lightroom mean I can find anything really quickly just by using the search capabilities. I don't really need to go bit by bit. So if I click on that, I can see all of the 8,400 images or so. I'm just going to take the metadata search away. 8,400 images or so that were in that unit of the year. Some of these are not going to be things I shot that year, in that period, but will be things that I've been working on from before. And what you can see here is that I've got folders under my jobs area which are sorted by the job number that each job had. So for example, let's see, this one here, Little Venice here, was a shoot for City West Housing, and the job number was incurred 080205. It's reverse date orders what I use as my job number, and if 2 jobs are started on the same day, I add a number 1 in between, and then I give it a title like that, so I can find things quite quickly. And this is where my raw files are stored on the hard drive. And in this case there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate shoots under that job number, and I can pick out the raw files from any one of those things in here quite easily. So that's how I organise my raws. Now within that I can use all of the editing capabilities of stacking and so forth to do an initial edit. If I pick the flag ones here, I can find the images I selected perhaps from that shoot. But I don't do most of my editing work. My workflow doesn't really happen mostly inside these folders, which are the hard drive folders where I'm storing the raws. This is really just about categorizing the raw files and perhaps my picks for that particular job. What I do instead is I use collections within Lightroom for doing all of the workflow stuff. So if I hide the folders away, what I'll have is a parallel structure in collections that relates strictly to the things that I'm doing. Now I actually number subsections of my collection hierarchy so that I can control the ordering of these things without having to have alphabetical order control the order of these titles. So that's how I go about doing these. And I have a number of categories of collection which are not date specific. They are to do with my personal work, stock things, submissions, competitions I've entered. So for example, competitions, it tells you the ones I've entered and my selects for those competitions. So what I can do is categorize all of my work by this second level of completely arbitrary organization that doesn't depend on the folders where I've stored my initial images. So if I come down to this area here, we'll see that I've got a parallel date-driven structure that I use for jobs and date-related things. And if I come into here, I'll be able to find a little Venice with the same job number under the same job. Now, what effectively I've done here is I've created a separate series of collections of images that are completely arbitrary. And what I do is I use it to implement a workflow. So I have collections which tell me the specific sets of the workflow images. After my initial selection in the folder, I create perhaps an initial selection from the customer's select and my select. Some of these collections are down here. They're just initial selects from particular shoots that I liked. But ultimately I'll end up with a workflow section in here which lists the stages I need to go to finish off particular images. So let's have a look at what we've got in here. I've got one called Final Selection Post Photoshop Adjust, Final Check Dust Spotting, Comp 1 for something that has to be comped out of separate images, and I can use each of these things as stages to check off I've done all my work. And then finally I've got a distrib collection which shows the final distribution of images I sent to the client. The final selection shows the ones that I've still got to work on with Photoshop to finish them off. The final one for dust spotting is empty because as I finish off bits of work, for example, I make sure each image is spotted, they'll be removed from this collection. And then there's one here that I was comping together that I think I didn't finally use. So what I think I'm hopefully showing is that the Lightroom's capability for collections allows you to implement not only finding and organizing your folders, but also a way of implementing a workflow specific to you related to a specific job. I use this distrib directory name, or collection name I should call it, as a quick way of really identifying which images finally got sent out on the CD to the client. So if anyone ever calls me up and says I would like to have another CD, I can simply go through to the distrib folder connected to that job's collection and just re-export that whole lot onto a CD using the export dialog in Lightroom. So if you haven't seen it, there's an export dialog here and a CD setting that can be preset with all of my requirements for outputting to a CD. So that endeth the lesson.